Welcome to another edition of Begley's Mailbag here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY NBA Insider, and we're here to answer your questions about the Knicks and the NBA. And let's get it going here with Fucci Main, our buddy Max Fucci. He wants to know, Randle's out, now what? Well, now the Knicks wait for OG Anunoby to get back. His aggravation in his elbow, they continue to wait on that, to monitor it, and to hope that he returns to the court. But as far as Randle goes, I'm told that he was devastated to not be able to make it all the way back and get on the floor with this Knicks team, particularly because how well they were playing with OG Anunoby after that trade. Obviously, they had a huge January after getting Anunoby, so Randle was trying hard to get back. One of the issues there was stability. The stability of the shoulder. Couldn't get to a place where everyone felt comfortable with Randle taking contact, and there was a fear that he could dislocate the shoulder again if he came back, and a fear that he could even do permanent damage to the shoulder. And so it never got to a place where everybody felt confident about him playing. But Randle, he's done this before. He's pushed through injury. He played last playoffs despite people telling him not to come back and play on that injured ankle. He did it anyway. I'm sure he wanted to do it in this instance, just wasn't able to get all the way there. So that now the Knicks, they turn to OG Anunoby, but also to more Josh Hart and probably more Precious Achiuwa in terms of minutes at the 4 and the 5, and they're going to have to kind of mix and match with this rotation with no Julius Randle. They've played pretty well without him to date. And if they can get OG Anunoby back, obviously they love that. I think they still like their chances first round in the playoffs, but obviously not having Julius Randle is a big hit for this club. Brunson World at Own Him Brunson wants to know, are the Knicks looking to move Alec Burks and or Bojan Bogdanovic in the offseason? I think it's premature to say anything the Knicks are looking or not looking to do in the offseason at this point. So much of it depends on what happens in the postseason. Do the Knicks need to make a change with the players they have on the roster? Is there an opportunity for them to go out and be aggressive in trading for a top player who maybe becomes upset in his own situation on his current team? I think all that is kind of up in the air until you get through the postseason. But one thing on both these guys, Burks is on an expiring contract, so the Knicks would have to make a decision on whether they want to re-sign him or not as a free agent. Now, Bogdanovic has a contract for next year that is not fully guaranteed, and so his deal could be used in a trade as filler in a trade to bring back a high salary player. I think that was part of the thing the Knicks were trying to accomplish at the trade deadline, was acquiring a player that was under contract for next year, that if they needed to use the salary in a deal in the offseason, they had that flexibility. So I'm not suggesting that Bogdanovic is just some throw-in a trade. I don't think that's assessing the situation correctly. He's a quality player, even though he struggled so far early in his Knicks tenure. But I do think that that was part of their thinking going into the trade deadline. So it's only natural to assume that would be at least something they would consider as they go into the offseason. Got a question here from Too Low Tech. And Frank wants to know, do you think the play of Precious Achiuwa has made Jericho the next young Knick to be moved in the offseason? I think that Precious Achiuwa will get a qualifying offer from the Knicks. He's a restricted free agent. And we talked to ESPN front office insider Bobby Marks on the putback recently about this. He seemed confident that the Knicks would give Achiuwa that qualifying offer and then see how the market viewed him in terms of his restricted free agency, what other teams would come after Achiuwa, things of that nature. But, in terms of Jericho or Precious, I would think it has to be one or the other, unless the Knicks included Mitchell Robinson in a trade in the offseason or were unable to re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein. Obviously, so there's a lot of potential moving parts at the center position. But with Sims, I don't think that they necessarily would be looking to get off of Sims because he has been impactful in his minutes, and I think he's really improved the way that he has defended, particularly the pick and roll. According to what Tom Thibodeau has said, he's been pleasantly surprised with Sims' minutes. So I would think in a perfect world they hold on to him, but again, you can't keep all four centers. Achiuwa, restricted free agent. So it just depends on how things go directly with Achiuwa's free agency, and then less directly with potential Mitchell Robinson being involved in a trade and or Isaiah Hartenstein walking in free agency. Got a question from Brunson is better. That's at Runs on Fumes. And Fumes wants to know, how likely is it for Tom Thibodeau to stagger Donte DiVincenzo with the bench to solve the bench scoring issue? Now, when you talk about bench scoring, I think one thing you have to take into account is how well Miles McBride has shot the ball lately. Since coming back into the rotation in late December, he's somewhere around 42% from beyond the arc, and he's played really well in this starting role that started on the West Coast trip, continued into the Knicks homestand with players hurt, specifically OG Anunoby, Julius Randle hurt. He's played well in this starting role. So if that shooting can translate back to his bench role, assuming all the Knicks get healthy and McBride goes back to the bench, if he can score like that off the bench, that bench scoring issue becomes, less of a glaring thing for Thibodeau to deal with, and maybe it becomes less necessary to stagger DiVincenzo's minutes. I think in a perfect world, the Knicks don't do that. They continue to have DiVincenzo in his current rotation with his minutes because he's played very well in that role, particularly with the starting unit. But if it's necessary and McBride's shooting falls off a little bit, or there's issues with Bogdanovich or Burks scoring off the bench, I don't think they would hesitate to stagger DiVincenzo and put him out there more so with that bench unit. But I don't think that it's something they would want to do. Obviously, you want to either get scoring from McBride off the bench or have Burks or Bogdanovich kind of reverse the trend that we've seen so far with them in a Knick uniform and have them start scoring the basketball here. Got a good question here from Nickinator. Nickinator, one of my favorite follows on Nick Twitter. He always has interesting opinions, and I appreciate them. Nickinator wants to know, will Tom Thibodeau be extended over the summer? And this is a big question. I wouldn't say it's hanging over the Knicks because they've had a very good season and there are more direct issues to deal with in terms of closing out the regular season, playoff opponent, etc. But certainly Tom Thibodeau going into the final year of his deal next year. And sometimes you see coaches get extended before they hit that final season. I was told that there was no serious extension talks prior to the season. So, that tells you that at least in part, there was a desire to assess how things went this season before going back to the table and talking extension. I don't know if they've discussed it in season, but, by and large, I think this is how you look at it. He has been, the best Knick coach of the last 2 decades. Maybe you want to talk about Mike Woodson being right there. Woodson had a very strong run, but it was shorter than what Thibodeau has done here. He's had a sustained run here where he's shown you time and again that he knows how to win basketball games in the regular season. And I think part of the extension angle, it depends on what happens in the postseason, because if the Knicks flame out in the first round and, everyone's upset, they want to see some changes being made, the obvious move is to change the head coach. That's just how it is in pro sports. But if the Knicks show confidence again in the postseason, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't extend Tom Thibodeau given the job that he has done to date. Again, he's got 1 more year left on his deal. And the one thing that I think about when you think about Tom Thibodeau's future, there's been times where I think his job has been very much in jeopardy. He's weathered those storms. Leon Rose has never kind of pulled the trigger. Obviously, he's never pulled the trigger, but I don't think he's ever really wanted to fire Tom Thibodeau because of their relationship, and he's had the opportunity to do so. So that tells you that I think it would take a lot for Leon Rose to move off of Tom Thibodeau. The other thing here is Jalen Brunson and Rick Brunson. Jalen Brunson, obviously the face of the franchise. Rick Brunson, Knick assistant coach, very trusted voice among the front office, very close with Tom Thibodeau. Those two really have a loyalty to Tom Thibodeau, and they really like Tom Thibodeau, and so I think their support really factors into whatever may or may not happen with Thibodeau in the offseason. So it's partially about results. If it's a glaring, awful postseason, the coach usually gets clipped, but then it's a little more nuanced with Leon Rose's relationship with Tom Thibodeau, the loyalty that he has shown Thibodeau in the past, and also Rick Brunson, Jalen Brunson, and their relationship with Tom Thibodeau very close. I think they would continue to support him here. So a lot at play. Interesting topic, obviously, for the Knicks. Right now, I would assume he gets extended, but still TBD there. Great question from Nickinator. Got a question here from Hans Bungle, and Hans wants to know, is there a realistic world where the Knicks pay OG Anunoby this summer, say around $35 million annually, and they can still offer Isaiah Hartenstein enough to keep him as well without trading any key players? The answer to that is yes, because the Knicks have bird rights for OG Anunoby. They have early bird rights on Isaiah Hartenstein, so they can exceed the salary cap to sign both players. When you get to big numbers in terms of team salary, you have to keep an eye on, obviously, where you are in terms of the luxury tax, in terms of that first apron, and then the punitive second apron, which going into next season, becomes a really trouble area for teams because it limits them in many different avenues to build out the roster, whether it's trades or different signings of players who have been waived, things of that nature. So there are a lot of elements at play once you get up to that second apron. So I think that's something that you keep an eye on there when you talk about numbers for Anunoby and Hartenstein, because you're going to have a next Jalen Brunson contract on the horizon. Julius Randle is going to be extension eligible. So there's money that's going to need to be spent here to keep this team intact beyond just the Anunoby and Hartenstein contracts. But yes, they do have the ability to get both of these guys back in the offseason, and I have no reason to think that it's not a priority for the Knicks to bring both of these guys back in the offseason. It is, as we sit here late in the regular season. Things can always change in the NBA. That's the nature of pro sports. But just based on everything that we've seen so far, the Knicks will be aggressive in trying to bring both of these guys back, and they will have the financial ability to bring both of these guys back without executing a big trade. That'll do it for this edition of Begley's Mailbag on SNY.TV. Thank you for your Knick questions, for your NBA questions, and please keep them coming because we'll have another edition of Mailbag coming at you pretty soon.